How we doing, folks? This is Coach Ronnie here with the Strength Coach Talk Show. Now, we have Coach Wesley here, and we have our rehab specialist, Azalea, here. Now, today we have a question from my man, K1ENG, over on Instagram. And today we want to answer his question, which is how to throw 90, number one. Then we're going to get into our topic, which is power, all right? So I want to go ahead and just dive right in. Let's answer this question from, like I said, my man K1ENG, how to throw 90. Now, Coach Wesley, we were briefly talking about this before the show even started. So why don't you just pick up where we left off, give him your answer, and I'll go ahead and we'll finish up with Isaiah. Isaiah's going to talk from a rehab perspective. So go ahead, Coach, you got it.
I think the best thing you can do is pick the right parents. I mean, throwing 90 is very, very rare. It's not a class for that I know of, or any type of specific instruction or anything like that. I mean, we also know that, skill sets can be, improved and that kind of thing, but, being able to have the arm strength and the arm quality that you can consistently throw over 90 is a gift.
No question. I'll go ahead and give my 2 cents on this. Basically, parents are key, genetics are huge. Even from that perspective though, to get into it a little more, you gotta have a system in place. When I say that, I mean, you gotta have a pitching coach, a performance coach, and even before that, there's a mentality that is involved. From what I recall, you're 15 years old and you wanna throw 90. I think a lot of kids, I wanna get your feedback on this, Coach. A lot of kids call what I call ESPN-itis. They see a guy like Chapman up there hitting the radar gun at 105, and all of a sudden they think they can do that the next day. Mm-hmm. This man, like Coach said, he had the genetics from his parents. He's a phenomenal athlete, number one. And he's been working at his craft since he was your age, and now he's, early 30s, late 20s, and he's hitting 100 miles an hour consistently. And that's just one example of a guy who's 90 plus. But this man has a program that he follows during the season, during the off season. He has most likely a nutrition coach, a performance coach. He has all this lined up, and he's been doing this as a kid. So this isn't a time where you need to even be focusing on 90. You need to be focusing on where you are mentally. Are you ready to make the long-term commitment to attempt to throw 90? Are you willing? Do you have the pitching coach already lined up? Do you have the performance coach? Are you watching what you eat? You need to line all these things up and follow these things consistently and progressively watch yourself improve just as a pitcher, not even thinking about 90 miles an hour. Don't worry about the radar gun. You worry about getting your system down and progressing each year, and becoming the better pitcher, being the best pitcher you can be. When you follow that system and do all these things, and in theory, with the genetics in place, maybe X amount of years down the road, you will be throwing 90. But let's not focus on throwing 90. Let's focus on developing as a pitcher and down the road being the best pitcher you can be. Now, like I said, Isaiah, our rehab specialist, he's going to talk about this same topic from a rehab perspective. Isaiah?
Sure. So just to kind of piggyback off Coach, in general, you want to make sure that your progression is smart and that you seek the help of the professionals around you. So if you have a strength coach, if you have an athletic trainer at your school, make sure that you chat with them so that you can make your progression smart to avoid the injury. And if you are dealing with any present injuries, make sure you get those addressed as well prior to trying to attempt to increase your performance so great in a small amount of time. And pretty much like they stated, you have to take those small steps and be smart with it because it's a whole performance that kind of helps your performance. It's not just one thing to go from one to the next. You basically just kind of set yourself up for injury.
All right, so there we have our first question of the show, how to throw 90. So K1SEN, I think it is. Why don't you go ahead and follow that advice and chime in every once in a while, leave us a message, let you know how you're doing and how you're progressing. Now, the topic that we chose to talk about today is power. Now, power is where the rubber hits the road from you being athletic to you being an athlete. Power, to sum it up, is how quickly you can basically generate force. plyometrics is a perfect example of power. I'll give you an example. When you start your the jumping phase, when you start with plyometrics, it's basically a jump. That's all it is. So when you bend down and drop down, you're loading. And power comes into play where the quicker you can go from loading to unloading. It's called the amortization phase. It's that little bit of time. High-end athletes can do that highly effective, highly efficiently. Like the quicker you are with that, the more power you're gonna have. Another example is a power clean. What a lot of strength coaches do will measure the speed of the bar, how fast it's moving. So that's another situation where you're going from a bar being on the ground in the defending position of a power clean. That is another way to determine power. So the good thing about power in general is it's also a way for an athlete to stay healthy, because once again, you're generating force, and when you're on the field moving in all planes and you need to change direction, that's when kind of power comes into play. For example, if you're loading your right hip, you need to get out of that right hip just as quickly to avoid another player, another athlete on your particular field. So that's just my take on power. Coach, what you got?
I think like power is one of the most important athletic attributes that an individual can have or possess, and actually the ability to be able to generate power rapidly is really what separates elite athletes from, mediocre athletes and that kind of thing. I think, one of the things that's really confusing today is, I think we confuse speed and power. And I think as professionals, sometimes we're not doing a good enough job of getting the general public to understand the difference between the two and how they coincide. And specifically with what I do a lot, I deal with a lot of guys that, want to increase their 40 time, okay? Just like you in baseball, you deal with a lot of guys that want to increase their velocity on the pitches and that kind of thing. But, one of the things that I have to get them to understand is that 40-yard dash, speed is actually an assessment of power, not necessarily foot speed. And, excuse me. And a lot of times, you'll see, guys that offer speed training, agility training, or whatever the case may be. And in my opinion, there's no such thing as speed training. There's such thing as speed practice. You can practice for an efficient start, a more efficient start. You can practice for a more efficient running form and that kind of thing. And some of those things will and can improve your time slightly. But at the end of the day, the name of the game is how fast you can generate force. And that's why when you see evaluations like the NFL Combine and things like that, although we may think that the 40-yard dash is key and supreme, but it's a reason why they do the broad jump. It's a reason why they do the vertical jump as well, because it is all an assessment of power. As you said, Coach, how quickly can you load and explode, and what is the results of you being able to load and explode in terms of height and distance?
All right. Now, plyometric is a very, as Coach said, explosive movement, explosive activity. So when you're moving like that, there's always a high chance of injury. So Isaiah, can you get into how necessary it is to be aware of this from a rehab perspective?
Most definitely. So it's definitely building blocks. So for example, what I find is that a lot of kids, especially in the high school setting, when they get in the gym at school and all your guys and friends are around you and they're trying to load too much too soon to generate quote unquote power. But you definitely have to be a little bit more smart about your approach so that you can avoid those injuries. For example, if you know that your body is not ready for that, then you have to scale back and consult with your strength coach or your coach, whomever you're dealing with, and make sure that your approach to that does protect your body in your efforts to build the power. What I find is that when kids do too much too soon, you end up setting yourself up with chronic injuries that carry over into the season, and then you find yourself constantly getting hurt throughout the season because you didn't set that foundation properly. So it's very important that you consult the professionals, consult your strength coach before you just jump into trying to generate and be more powerful.
All right. Now this is something I wanted to bring up. I think I talked to you about this, and both of y'all. ACL at the NFL right now it's at an all-time high.
ACL
injuries. Yeah, ACL injuries. Yeah, and that could be something that could tie into power. And I just wanted to get you guys' opinion on it. I know that stuff. A lot of it's acute, and I get that.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, an ACL can be a change direction, transverse plane rotation,
mm-hmm.
ACL blown out type of thing. So when we consider power, how do you think? This is, it's just all opinion.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think that power or lack thereof, can relate to ACL injury?
I mean, personally, I think it can have a lot to do with it. I think, sometimes as strength and conditioning professionals, like when we hear about an athlete getting injuries and multiple injuries, over a period of time, we automatically feel like we can fix it. You know what I'm saying? Especially like with the Derrick Rose situation. You hear guys all the time say, well, there's something wrong with this training, there's something not right with the coaching or whatever the case may be, but like, I refuse to believe that if it's a guy that's playing basketball at the highest level that you can play basketball at, that he is consistently around faulty programming. I think some people are just injury prone. And as power relates to plyometry and ACL injuries and that kind of thing, one of the things that we have to keep in mind, the importance of being able to decelerate properly. And a lot of times when we talk deceleration, a lot of times, people think that we're just talking about deceleration in a straight linear path or whatever. But, other than like maybe track and field, it's no sport that is played, in a straight line. So the ability to be able to decelerate in multiple planes of motion and be able to stabilize that deceleration, be able to absorb that force and regenerate that force again safely and effectively is one of the things that we can do to kind of reduce the chances of ACL injuries happening. But I think when you play sports at a very, very high level, and when I talk about a high level, I'm talking about athletes that can generate high rates of speed or whatever, and especially in terms of changing directions, you're always going to be subject to ACL injuries and things like that, regardless of training.
I want to bring something up to Azalea, because for some crazy reason, I always remember when Jamal Anderson blew out his knee the second time on Monday Night Football against Dallas. I remember so vividly, I don't even know why. It was a sprint draw, right?
Right.
So it does a little hop, like you say, decelerate, rotate to go right, drops right there, ACL gone.
Mm-hmm.
Now one attribute for me with him was his quads were huge. And that was at the time.
I was about to get into that. Yeah, go ahead.
His quads were huge, and you look back, that was around the time where I think Serena Williams was blowing out a lot too.
Mm-hmm.
And she's another one, huge quad.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was a contributing factor to him blow out. He blew out twice.
Right.
Blew out twice, and I think Serena blew out a couple of times, I think too.
Yeah.
And I remember if I was at a conference or something, but Gray Cook was talking about that quad dominance and the ACL blowing out, and he was talking about Serena being quad dominant. And like I said, she blew out, I believe, twice. So Azalea, we're talking about quad dominance. That's something you can touch on. But what other, from a rehab perspective, what other attributes do you see when it comes to ACL injuries?
Well, first you have the performance side, which deals with a lot of the technical things as far as form and approach to your different techniques that you guys have touched on. But then you also have the tissue or response to injury. So the main thing that deals with is just recovery. So how well are you recovering, not only after injury, but even before an injury even happens. So are you taking care of your body every day after you train, every day after you practice, every day after you play, because it all adds up, because the tissue has its own response to injury. And once an injury happens, the tissue is never quite the same. And so the key with that is recovery and how well you take care of yourself every day, even before an injury happens. There's a lot of dynamics around ACL, from technique to gender to sport, to just so many things. And so you have to take all of that into consideration. It's even more reason why recovery and take care of yourself is definitely key.
And I think, in respect to like quad dominance. I don't really think it's a such thing as quad dominance. I think like you either have weak hamstrings and hips or you don't. I mean, because like, you know, the quads have to be engaged and they have to, you know, do their job, especially in terms of sprinting and being able to absorb force and that kind of thing. But a lot of times I think, you know, with ACL injuries or whatever the case may be, it goes back to our inability to be able to absorb force properly. And when you talk about an athlete like Jamal Anderson or, you know, someone who has significant body weight, you know, for his height and structure and that kind of thing, I think a lot of times that has a lot to do with it. And, you know, if you look at the injury that Bo Jackson had, and, you know, Bo Jackson, he used to brag about not lifting weights and that kind of thing. But I think, like, if you really, you know, take a look at it, we're talking about a person who was naturally brought to this earth to generate power. And I think that he is one of those athletes that would have really, really benefited the most from a sound strength and conditioning program, just to be able to develop his braking system a little bit better.
Yeah, you know, bringing that up, I just remember at that time, going back to that time period, the posterior chain was the hot thing.
Right, right.
You know, people would just talk about glute activation, like glute activation and hamstring and all that stuff.
Still to this day.
That's my next point. I still don't think people are activating the glutes enough.
Right.
You know, I see a lot of band work. This is just a personal drill I like to do, where I call them glute manuals. I'll lay somebody on a table or platform or whatever, and just literally, you know, you do shoulder manuals. Do the same thing with the glutes.
In a supine position.
Yeah, in a supine position. And then I'll ask them, okay, I'll tell them, make sure you just use your glutes. And they can't do it for about 2 or 3 weeks, because they literally don't know how to recruit the glutes. But when they finally get it, man, it's like night and day. Crazy stuff started to happen. I know when I started doing that, I had a sore groin that wouldn't go away. It went away like that.
Right.
My old boss, he had big dude, like 6'7", 6'5", 270. He had sciatica, wouldn't go away. He started doing that, gone. So, you know, I just think it's something that, going back to that posterior chain, I don't care if it's 15 years ago or whatever, like you were saying, you gotta have a sound program. If you have a sound strength and conditioning program, that posterior chain is gonna do what it needs to do, and those quads are gonna do what they need to do.
Right.
You know, and if there's an imbalance there, that can contribute.
Right.
But if you have a sound strength and conditioning program, in theory, you're good.
And my question is, what really is an imbalance in terms of the glutes and the hamstrings, and how do we evaluate? I mean, I hear people throw it out there all the time, but like, what is it? How do we evaluate? I have no idea.
The only way I can do it is, I think of the muscle testing, you know.
Just manual muscle testing
yeah.
and difference in range of motion at the different joints.
True. Yeah, that's true. Good point.
But I guess my question is, how do we know that someone has adequate balance between the hamstring group and the quadricep group? Or can we really know that?
To get an actual, like a true test, I mean, that would involve going into the lab and hooking them up and seeing what muscles are firing and when. But since most people don't have access to that, you know, muscle testing and range of motion is your foundational concept you draw on.
All right, I think we covered a lot. I think we covered a lot in this episode, as far as plyometrics. You know, as far as how important they are, and then we went to the injury prevention aspect. But that's huge when it comes to, like you were saying, like everybody was saying, that's huge when it comes to it's great to generate, but you gotta be able to slow this thing down.
Right,
you know
and we can be able to generate again.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the name of the game.
That's the name of the game. So we covered plyometrics. We got a lot done there. I think you know what you need to do when it comes to throwing 90. Relax on that a little bit. Get your program together. And this is our second episode of the Strength Coach Talk Show. You guys stay tuned for the next. Make sure you ask questions. Contact myself, contact Coach Wesley, contact Azalea. All the information is going to be available within this video. So like I said, ask us questions. You guys look out for the next episode. Y'all have a good one. Peace.